Are you a bit more optimistic about the economy? I know it's still some, pretty painful fall, but are you more optimistic about the economy because lockdown was eased sooner than expected?
Not as pessimistic.
Not as pessimistic.
Not as pessimistic. It's not about being optimistic. It's going to be a sea of red all over the place. We're still going to have the contraction that is the greatest since the OECD was created 60 years ago, but not as bad as we thought, mostly because of the rather timely and very big injection of resources.
Okay, but do you also see actually productivity and things restarting quicker? Does it mean that we'll have less scarring?
The problem here is that this V-shaped reaction or V-shaped recovery is not going to happen. What we had is it dropped like a lead balloon, then it rebounded somewhat, and after June, we were a little bit enthusiastic, maybe too much, and July, August, it tapered off. Naturally, it was going to happen. Now we're going to see the reality. Now we're going to see the hard numbers. We're going to be counting literally all the casualties, and that includes, of course, not only jobs, but also SMEs. We're going to see if tourism can recover, and we're going to see whether investment can recover. We are having investment still below where we started, at the end of 2019, and it was already under pressure. Remember, trade and investment were already under pressure. We're already negative to flat, but slightly negative to flat because of the trade tensions, because of all the pressure that countries were putting among themselves, China and the United States and Europe, etc. Well, now we are in a situation where then COVID struck. And of course, that makes it worse. So, as I said, we're going to see a recovery in 2021, but it's still going to be below the level of 2019. It's that bad.
Okay. Yeah, and you said it. It's less pessimistic, but still pessimistic. There are a number of emerging markets that you've actually had to downgrade further. I'm looking at South Africa. I'm looking at India, Argentina, and Mexico. What happened?
Well, they have been hardest hit. You have cases like Argentina, which already had the financial problems before. They were dealing with the IMF and they were dealing with their creditors before. So it's a kind of a continuation. But in the case of South Africa or the case of Mexico or the case of Brazil, etc., what you are having is a very hard hit by the pandemic, among other things, because the structures, the health structures, were not as strong as they were in many of the countries in the West.
Dr. Gurria, we've squeezed you in around Daniel Yergin and his wonderful book, The New Map. I want you to talk to me about the scenario chart on the cover of the OECD website about the new map of joblessness. How do you and Laurence Boone perceive the idea of furlough to permanent unemployed, the rationalization of a lesser labor share worldwide?
What we're saying is, number one, don't take away the support. Don't take away the relief too fast. Maintain that relief, because you're talking about tens of millions of people who today are not officially registered as unemployed, but because they are benefiting from either chômage partiel in France or Kurzarbeit in Germany, or the corresponding mechanism in the UK, the United States, etc. But the question is, let's continue. Of course, Germany just announced that they will continue the support throughout 2021. Not every country is going to be in a position to do that, but we have to continue this because we are now going to be in a tapering off of the situation, and we're going to see that unemployment is going to taper off, unfortunately, at a very, very high level.
With your North American expertise, Angel Gurria, I'm going to ask you this question. We're going to rip up the script here right now. Daniel Yergin defined in Commanding Heights the previous capitalism. He's talking about the new map now of a disrupted future. Why can't the United States be more like those societies you're talking about who are comfortable in providing support in a global natural disaster?
The United States is a very dynamic society, and at the same time, it is 50 societies. At the same time, you know, every country every state is a different country in the world. It's the size of many of the countries in Europe, and then even within those states, you have very large cities which have their own way of doing things and their own bias towards doing things. So it's very difficult to put it all together. But I think one of the lessons of the pandemic is precisely that we can pick up a lot of the things that work well in many of the other countries and apply them to our own countries because they make sense. Because things like masks, things like distancing, things like avoiding crowds, these things, washing your hands constantly, these things work. And actually, those countries that did it better, plus technology now about the tracking and the tracing and massive testing, that's going to hold us until we develop a vaccine or medicine or both.